Sometimes stories like Donnie Darko are fun when you start at the end and you work your way back to the beginning. This case, a tale of betrayal and fake friends in the video game world, in the world of indie video game development, is one that's going to start at the end and doesn't necessarily get better as we get to the beginning. It's a story of, I don't know why anyone would need enemies when you have friends like this, when you have an industry around video games that is like this, a group of friends that you can make, you can turn them into celebrities, and they forget all that and publish million-word articles before you're even in the ground, talking about how this is all about you. Now, we've talked about all the players in this, and the ultimate goal, as I've said always, is to hopefully catalog everything, as people like to remove things. And that's why I'm hoping that as you're watching this, you're liking the video, you're leaving a comment down below, and then you're posting it on whatever social media you use, whether that be Gab, Minds, Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, because there's two sides of the story, and I think it's important that we don't allow the narrative to be controlled for all video game fans, fans of Alec's work, and fans of truth. The end of this article ends with probably one of the most out of touch and maybe true statements, and I'll just read it to you. He's gone, and I'm left to fumble for words for what he did to me years ago and what it means to me now. World ends. I'm most affected. I'm not going to read this entire post because at times it's infuriating. At times it's needless. At times it's redundant. We know the tale. We know that a video game was developed. That game, A Night in the Woods, was wildly popular. We know the major players around this. ZQ made a Twitter post that went viral. Scott Benson, the co-creator of that game, not only disavowed Alec, but ended the project and cut ties with him. Scott Benson then hid his Twitter account, only to return to a Medium post in which people are not allowed to comment on. Truly heroic. Now, I understand that there may be some complicated feelings around this for Scott, but what I don't understand is why you need to blog about them. This is modern day. Why not write these words in a journal? Why do you need to make a public statement? These people are deeply damaged, deeply obsessed with the dopamine drip that is online. Just look at this particular website. Medium.com allows you to like a post only. So you get to put this post out and you don't get to see any of the negative or see any rebuttal. You only get to, quote, clap for an article. That's where we come in, because you don't get to control the narrative. Scott, we know what happened. You abandoned your quote-unquote friend in his time of need to join in on the mob, and now you're feeling guilty. Well, I'm sorry you should feel that way. Now, in this article, he attempts to justify his actions. And as I've always said, maybe the things that were said really did happen. We don't know. Maybe they did. My entire position has always been that it's not for the court of public opinion. It's not for everyone else to decide. And before I get into this, I want to share a brief story from my history. I haven't experienced many people passing in my day. A few, both grandmothers and a couple of friends. I remember one of the only memories I have from any of these events afterwards was some words that my dad said to me. My dad was an excellent son. He was one of 10 brothers and sisters. He was pretty much the only one that took care of his mother until the end. I remember going with him as she went into the home, and he would visit her long after her memory had failed her. He took care of everything. My dad is a great man. He is a man that I look up to, a man that has simple beginnings. He's been a factory worker his whole life, but a man that lives by a code that I myself hope to live up to one day. And I remember looking around at his brothers and sisters at this event afterwards, and there were a few people crying. I remember him saying something along the lines of, the ones that are crying are the ones that wronged her. And that's kind of why I'm not crying, or something like that. And it was, I'm paraphrasing, but I remember like, dang, dude, that was deep. And it's so true. You can view the people that are hiding from all this as their form of tears. You can look at this 1,000,000-word stink piece, justifying it, turning it into, it's all about me. Why would you trash the man? He's not even in the ground yet. Why? This is disgusting. I hope people remember this and never buy a game that you ever work on, work with, any of your friends make, any game you retweet. You should be poison in the video game industry. Who does this? This came after a week in which several revelations of his past and present actions came to light from several sources. I had no issue believing them. I still believe them, and not just out of principle. I'm not one to just make a snap judgment about someone I've known for 6 years. The reason I believe these things is they have roots that go back the entire 6 years, and I want to talk about it now. Why? What matter is it? Who is this for? This is enraging. I'll continue. I don't want to discuss too many specifics, because I don't have any truth. They aren't my stories to tell. I have my own story. He talks about how he met Alec and that the time together was very public. In June 2013, I was a typical struggling freelance animator, designer, and artist. He saw my tweets. He thought they were funny, and my animations, which I guess he thought were funny. He got in touch with us if we'd want to make a game. Of course I had. We spoke for the first time that night. We talked about what we considered interesting indie games during what was in hindsight of the waned years of an indie game boom. Colorful, narrative. Alec had made a name for himself as co-creator of the award-winning game Aquaria a few years earlier. In the years between, he worked on other things here and there, most notably a perpetually stalled project about a living marionette. He mentioned the project almost immediately, that we could never quite figure out what to do with, blah, 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 blah. We hit it off pretty much immediately. I was a 32-year-old artist, don't care. Alec was 29. We didn't have a lot in common, but we got along. Great. Sounds like a good friend. He ran very hot and seemed to take offense to things quickly, but balanced that with boundless enthusiasm for whatever he was doing. That was my impression of him, and we both were on meds for different things. So at the very beginning, he knew he was not a balanced individual. He goes on to talk about how then they worked together on a night in the woods, and it was wildly successful. He suggested we take 6 months to prototype the game. I told him I couldn't possibly take 6 months off. I thought it would fail miserably. He suggested a Kickstarter, and then it didn't fail. And suddenly, and not for the last time, we were news. Without much warning, I wasn't a freelance animator anymore. I was full-time. Sounds like a dream come true. Sounds like the man, despite his flaws, made you. Sounds like a man, despite his flaws you knew about, made your entire career, brought you lots of money and notoriety. The next 6 months was a whirlwind. Bethany came on board officially. We began working on this in February 2014, blah, 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 blah. Earlier this year at GDC, I watched Alec on social media and watched him kind of snap at people. He messaged me when he had too much to drink. It was going around doing bad. So he knew he was doing bad things, blah, blah, blah. Fair enough, I thought. I reminded him to take his meds. A month or so later, this other thing happened. At E3, I had mostly a good time with Alec. We clicked as partners on the E3 floor very well. I was more of a talker, so I did the legwork there. It sounds like everything was good. Alec would make comments from time to time that seemed off and always explain them later as him being tired, or he didn't know what he meant, etc. I didn't know the guy very well at the time. I didn't know what corner of the indie game scene, other than another seemed like a social mess. I didn't know who almost any of the people he mentioned were. That fall, a little over a year into development, his behavior became more erratic. Again, none of this is necessarily important. He just got like that sometimes. In the winter, we finished out the second game, Lost Constellation, in 5 weeks or so. I think that was one of the high points of the whole thing. The work snapped Alec out of his funk. He would talk about how he didn't need work-life balance and that work was his life. I told him I'd sort of lost that mindset when I was imposing about my jobs I previously had. Oh God, I had a job once, Alec said. That was the worst 3 weeks of my life. I laughed. He explained that he was kidding. I said, okay. Alec would say things like this. Again, Alec was a deeply troubled individual. I don't think anybody is out there trying to present that he wasn't. All right. And I think if they are, okay, maybe you'd have to then prove all these people as liars, I suppose, or give me credible evidence otherwise. But that's never been my position. My position has always been that it's probably what was said about him was probably true. But the people around him sound like some of the most garbage humans I've ever had the misfortune of getting to know. In July 2015, he had largely come out of his low times from the year before. We'd heard him mention, that people he was dating here and there, blah, 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 blah. During GDC 2015, he had a breakdown. He did bad things, and okay, great. None of this is important anymore. He's gone. Again, my interest is not in exposing that Alec was an individual in the video games industry that needed help. We know that, clearly. In the summer of 2015, I began having issues about every day out of nowhere. And so he ended up, all right, I'm going to not work with him anymore. In June of that year, I decided that if he was going to do this, then I could fix this. I could pull this project along. Yes, he sounds like he was terrible to work with. These type of things. Again, he's writing about how working with somebody, by the way, entirely voluntarily, ruined his life before he's even in the ground. Right? He talks about him enrolling in therapy. Why is this, by the way, you talk about things being your story to tell. How come you're airing out all of his dirty laundry? All of it. Is this something his sister endorsed? Is this something his parents endorsed? Is this something he would have wanted you to do? Because who is this for? Seriously. In 2016, I was having problems. Okay, great. Good for you. I want to get to the part where a lot of this is just airing out Alec's dirty laundry, and I don't want to do that. I don't need to do that, and you shouldn't give any mind to this post either, because it is the most self-important drivel I've ever read. I want to get to the part where we decided not to work with Alec again back in 2015. I warned friends who asked me back then not to work with him. I confided in a small group of people what was happening to me. So you went around bad-mouthing the guy. Okay, great. Maybe what you were saying is true, but you sound like a gossip. You sound like a bad friend. You sound like a bad coworker to me. My friend Dan came into town and had been very worried about me and angry at that Canadian guy you're working with. The woman who cuts my hair was in roller derby and she offered to hurt him. A lot of local friends were ready to throw down. Good friends offer to throw down. Okay, so I assume you're not a friend, as you are completely airing out all of this. Is disgusting. I'm reading a lot of this for the first time because I want my reactions to it to be real. I'd asked people who knew not to tell anyone. This is pretty common. I had reasons. During development, we couldn't deal with the publicity, publicly hashing this out. I was too exhausted to handle some of the big public things. Alex, blah, 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 blah. I wasn't keeping Alec's secret. I wasn't keeping mine. This is how this happens. Alec never told me or anyone. But Alex had changed. We'd seen it. We watched it happen. We put a lot of work into it. It was suddenly 2019. We learned that Alec had a new team together, and it had been years since he was ever a problem. He was doing talks at conferences. He had made new friends, talked about boring stuff like coffee and time management, and seemed to have really healthy relationships, both personally and professionally. I checked in on him from time to time. I checked in with people who knew him. Smooth sailing. I was really proud of the guy. No need to worry. Happy ending. And then things fell apart. I've spent the last week tracking down and talking to people close to him. People who knew him years ago. People who knew him. It's shocking how many of us had eerily similar experiences. Well, yeah, people are who people are. Most people who have interactions with me will tell the same way. We'll say the same thing about you when you're not around. You are who you are. Why is that shocking? Things came out about Alec's behavior right before we knew him came out last week. They were backed up by other people I trust, people who were around at the time. Suddenly, a lot of what Alec said back then about his exes, about the subject, blah, blah, blah. I immediately reached out to Alec about these things. He gave me non-committal response and then disappeared. I never heard from him again. Where is the part where you made a public statement? Right after this, as so often, when silence gets broken, several people came forward. I found out about what I thought about Alec had been changing. He had been treating other people like he had done to me in 2015, blah, blah, blah. Like a lot of people who do this, I don't think he ever consciously did any of these things in a knowingly evil way. He was aware of some of his paranoia was due to conditions. Yeah, right. That didn't stop you from publicly disavowing the guy, did it? You didn't have to say anything. You didn't have to make any comment. You didn't have to write a 1,000,000-word essay about the guy after he's gone and can't defend himself. Alec had prestige and money. Oh. Well, there's a possible root of all these people wanting to talk badly about you, isn't there? I'm not saying that's a fact. I'm just saying it's plausible, isn't it? He had what he wanted to be, what seemed to be a ticket to making your game dev dreams come true. He had a long pattern of picking someone who was really interested in it, immediately suggesting they make a game together, and then making them dependent on him, and then later abandoning it and them. Okay. Great. So don't work with the guy. Why is everybody... You know what I don't understand? Is everybody seems to know everything about the guy and just how bad of a dude he is to work with. Why do people keep signing up to doing it? And why do people feel bad for them when they do? You wanted to get rich making video games. It didn't work out for you. Tough. You willingly did that. You looked at the money the guy made and you wanted a piece of that. That's what it looks like to me. That's what it looked like. And you literally write, I survived him. A lot of people got it much worse than I can wrap my head around. And I'm a man. People who aren't men got it worse. I thought I was unique and that this thing started and stopped with me. I thought I'd helped him truly change. I was wrong. I feel so stupid. I feel gross. This is how one man can have several people he takes advantage of. It makes you lonely. I mean, this stuff is ridiculous. I cared a lot about Alec. No, you didn't. If you did, you didn't write this. Despite all of this, but covering for and enabling the harm someone does to people around you isn't caring for them. I don't know about that. Seems like the only person you care about is yourself and your future in the video game industry. And look, I actually understand where this guy's coming from. Because the way the culture is in the video game world, if he doesn't come out and fully disavow, he's probably never going to work in the indie game development ever again. He's never going to get a job making video games ever again if he dares side with someone he alleges that he cared about. There's nobody he cares about more than himself, clearly. That's the reason you make public statements. That's the reason you hide your Twitter. That's the reason you write a 1,000,000-word essay on medium.com about somebody who's not around to defend themselves. This is 100% about your future career making video games, your career in the indie game development world. It's blatantly obvious, and you, sir, are a sad, weak man. I look forward to never purchasing a video game you ever make, never purchasing a game a friend of yours makes, never purchasing a game you work on the sound effects for, never purchasing a game that you purchase. These are the people that was his support system. Just put it that way. Now, that doesn't absolve him of anything he did. But this is exactly what this culture of cancellation does. It's ran by, fueled by weak, broken individuals targeting others with the same affliction. It's a sad tale. I guess, were entertained or at least brought to some thought about this during this video, and we'll talk to you again real soon. I sincerely hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, before you leave, make sure you leave a like and drop a comment on it. It's the only way to help the channel grow in today's YouTube environment. Above, you'll find a link to subscribe, and make sure you turn your notifications on, or if you just want to check out another video, there's one of those up there too.